Hi, I'm Jim O'Toole, coming to you today from the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics. We have a special guest today. His name is Steve Brown, and he is a former state legislator in the state of Missouri, and in that same state he was the Deputy Attorney General. Steve has a cautionary tale that he's going to tell us today, and he's been kind enough to share his experience with us, and I think we can all benefit from his words of wisdom. So really happy to have you with us. Yours is a cautionary tale with a very, very sad ending. You lost your promising political career. You were disbarred, shamed, as a result of having to plead guilty to charges of conspiring to obstruct justice. What is interesting about your case is that it didn't have to happen. You were helping a friend who was running for elective office, and you decided that you would help him by setting up an independent fund or a committee to raise money to prepare basically attack ads about one of his opponents. And of course, to do that under the federal election law, the campaign committee, his campaign committee, and your independent committee could really have no contact with each other. But it ended up that, totally unbeknownst to you, that the two groups had shared certain kinds of lists of potential donors and people who could be involved in the campaigns, which is a violation of the law. Now, of course, when that became clear, had you just owned up to it, you probably would have had a very, very small fine and perhaps a slap in the wrist and a little bit of embarrassment, but it probably would have blown over and you could have gone on and had a great career. But it didn't happen that way. You somehow got engaged in a cover-up. And as we know from the history of the last decade or so, that punishment for cover-ups are almost always far worse than punishments for any kind of initial misdoing. Given the fact that initial FEC fine would have been very small, why did you take the risk of getting engaged in the cover-up?
The reason why is something that only someone in my shoes might truly really be able to understand. It's difficult to talk to people sort of outside the realm of politics as to why we would think this way. But to someone like myself and the people I was involved in this with, our political capital and our political reputations were everything to us. And they were the true hard currency that we valued our world on. And even though it might sound, this would have, had we admitted to the underlying violation, it would have been a week's worth of stories in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Local NPR might have done a few things on it, but it would have been, in the grand scheme of things, it would have been weathered rather simply. But to someone like myself, my political reputation, my reputation as a young comer on the scene was everything to me, and which was wrong, by the way, to think that way, but that was clearly my thinking, and it was my desire to protect that led me to make decisions that were just wrong on multiple levels.
Well, is it some of it sort of like just getting caught up in the game? I mean, it seems to be, people talk about the game of politics, and sometimes, unfortunately, the game of business too, and we really know that we shouldn't think about them that way, but when you get caught up in a game, you get carried away. Yeah?
You get caught. We were completely caught up in the game, and we were sort of on the ascent in the game. We felt that way, and we were doing everything we could to continue on that ascent, and attempting to protect that ascent above all else when we should have been thinking about other things.
What is, to me, particularly sad about your case is that you and your colleague who ran for office, who was apparently a very, very good person, and you were a good person, are a good person. You had no black marks against your character. As a matter of fact, you entered politics to be clean and to do the right things, and you had the best of purposes. You really wanted to do good. And you were obviously a moral person, but somehow along the way, you got caught up into all of this. I mean, how could that possibly have happened?
It's a thought that's in my mind often, and I go over and over it. It was truly a failure just a huge failure on my part not to fall back on my training as well as my own upbringing to make the correct decisions. And we were simply blinded by, we were sort of blinded by what we felt we could do. It was sort of an ends justifies the means. We want to get there. We want to get to the seat of power because we believe that we're going to do good things, and therefore we should not be tripped up by this relatively minor situation. And it's hard to make people understand that you could do something wrong because you ultimately wanted to do something very right, but that is the case. We wanted to get there. I wanted to get to the legislature. I was a firm believer in good government and making government work and doing good things through it, and I wanted desperately to get there and do that, and that caused us to make poor decisions.
How, along the way, you even had some red flags or some warning signs. I mean, even though you were not actively involved in this, you were not part of any kind of conspiracy. You were yourself early on in this whole thing. I mean, you learned about somebody else's actions, but you did have some hints along the way that there might have been some problems. I mean, did you not at the time realize that these were red flags, or did you just think that they were minor, or how could you have ignored these? It seems to me several opportunities when you actually probably could have gotten out of this with no more than a slap on the wrist.
One of the problems was that while I was not knee or chest deep in it, my friend who had filed the false affidavit was chest deep in it, and the desire to try to help him in the situation certainly caused it. But it also was the inability to just sort of take your bad medicine early on, to say that this is something we need to fix. It's gonna be difficult for a period of time, that we need to fix it now. That bad medicine early is much better than what happens with the cover-up, and it gets much worse.
How old were you at the time?
Well, at the time that it all came down, I was 42. From 30, this went on over a period of time, over about 4 years or so. So I was 38 to 42 during the project.
And your friend was even younger.
Correct.
Yeah.
He was about 7 years younger than me.
I think a lot of young people are going to be watching, this video. And I wonder what advice that you would give them so that they could avoid becoming involved in this kind of a situation. I mean, because let's face the fact that in business and government, these things do happen, and they happen a lot more often than most of us realize. What advice would you give to young people? What lessons can we take from your very, very sad experience?
There are three things, and they all rank roughly the same. Number one, you need to have confidants outside of wherever it is you're in. You could be in a law firm, you could be in a business. In my situation, it would be politics. You need confidants and friends that you talk to about these things outside of that world. As I said, I was thinking about things in a way that really was wrong. And people outside could have easily set me straight in my thinking. The other thing is this: trust your instincts. Most people involved in these things, in their business or in a law firm or in politics, they're smart, they've been to good schools, they've probably got good families, they know right from wrong. And if you start thinking that you're getting too close to that line, more than likely you are getting too close to that line, and you should go the other way. So trust yourself and trust your instincts. And then finally, it's a much different world today. Things are very transparent. Internet, smartphone cameras, you can Google anybody about anything. There's no more smoke-filled rooms in politics. Boards of directors have to be very open and transparent. So you're not, I think you need to understand that that's the world in which you live in. And here's a rule of thumb that I like to live by now, and that I recommend everybody live by. If you're contemplating a particular action, the standard should be this: if it appears on the front page tomorrow that I took this particular action, and I'm okay with it appearing on the front page, then I would go ahead and do it. Okay? If it's something that you say to yourself, wouldn't really like that to be on the front page, then you shouldn't do it. You need you need to believe that your actions are going to be seen by a wide group of people, and you need to act accordingly.
There are several lessons that we can take from what you've told us today. The first one is that good people can get into trouble.
Certainly.
And the second one is, I think, a very important one. Whenever we smell, possibly we think we smell a rat, that is, we feel that there may be some kind of an ethical problem, or even if we're not sure that it's there, the importance of talking to somebody else about it, some disinterested individual, to sort of get their advice on this, somebody who we respect. And I want to tell you, this means a lot to me, because I was in the Nixon administration, and I got very, very close to getting caught up in Watergate. And I probably would have been one of those people who was a household name if it had not been for my own wife. And I went to her very early on in the whole process, and I told her about what I was witnessing in the White House, and she got me out of there. And so I understand where you're coming from, and I want to tell everybody out there, believe me, you think what happened to Steve is rare. It can happen to anybody. If you would like to learn more about the Markkula Center, please visit us on our website.